Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Welcome back to the show. Jim Ramsey is joining us here from Aletheia Marriage Counseling Services, which of course is his expertise in marriage and counseling and so much more. And we're excited that he's back with us today, talking about, making marriages work. What works, what doesn't, how can he help you? And he's here guiding so many people, and to avoid conflict, to minimize conflict, and to love more. And as we prepare for the holidays, I know we're going to kind of talk a little more about that because there's some difficulties around this time of year. First and foremost, please introduce yourself to everyone. Thank you so much, Jim.
Well, it's good to be with you, Jill, this holiday season. And I think we've agreed to talk a little bit about some of the difficulties people face during this time, and hopefully we can be of some help.
Absolutely. How do we contact you?
Well, probably the fastest way is just call me on the phone, 406-370-3515.
Beautiful. And the website?
The website is AlethiaMarriageCounseling.com.
Awesome.
You'll find a lot of interesting information there if you're interested in talking with me.
Beautiful. Well, we are excited to have you here today. And yes, the holidays are upon us, and that could be challenging for so many, for so many different reasons. And let's talk about some of the difficulties facing couples in general and challenges as we prepare for the holidays. Would you mind sharing?
Well, the holidays kind of bring out either the best or the worst. If you really got a super compatible relationship with families and friends, you've known them for years, and it's a wonderful time. But oftentimes people marry people that have quite different family backgrounds, have little contact with them, and there's all kinds of possible difficulties that come up, and it requires each of you to really get into each other's shoes and be empathetic and talk about what possible problems might arise and how to minimize or eliminate them.
And, we're talking, it's hard enough around the holidays for some people, but the stresses of the family, of bringing, of the cooking, of the gifts, of the expectations, it seems to kind of, I don't know any couple that's that gets along during the holidays. There's a lot of chaos, I should say, right? And especially when you have family coming in from different, how does that work? It reminds me of what's a Christmas Vacation, right? With Clark Griswold, and the in-laws come and the grandma has the cat in the box, and it's just like chaos, right? So let's talk about that, because we are going to be dealing with seeing our extended family. So how should we prepare for this?
Well, I think the key is for a couple to really understand and be realistic about the differences and the kinds of things they're going to face and prepare themselves for it. For example, it may be something extreme, like if we're only going to be there a couple of days, there's lots of people offer to stay in a motel just to take the pressure off of them a little bit. But it also takes the pressure off of you because you can kind of get away from it a little bit. I mean, that's one example. But to talk about what kinds of things to expect and how we can head them off at the pass, and how we can have some understandings maybe between the principals ahead of time to minimize problems,
Yeah, of course. And let me ask, what do you do for the holidays? Just curious.
Well, as a child growing up, every single year we went from Montana to San Diego to be with my wife's family. And it was just a tremendous tradition. It was quite an expense for us to travel that far every year, but we did it and really enjoyed it. I think now I live in Montana, and my one son is in Indianapolis and the other is here in Montana. So we see the one in Montana on a regular basis, but then we go over to the coast to see my wife's kids, my second wife's kids. I talked to you about that both of us were widowed and remarried. So we have adult kids over there. So we get together with family as often as we possibly can.
Yes, and I love that because, there are some potential problems that, people arise, and people, do you want to share some stories of what can happen?
Well, I think a lot of the problems have to do with women, unfortunately. You've heard the stories about the mother-in-laws.
Yeah.
So, you can just have a mother-in-law, for example, that's very close to her son and does things differently than his wife does. you know, and maybe kind of indulging her son, who she doesn't see except holidays, and that can be kind of upsetting. It could be a thing where the mother-in-law is doing certain things that are annoying relative to maybe your wife's kids, or
Hmm.
how you deal with kids. And maybe you, as a man, are enjoying the sports on TV for Thanksgiving or Christmas with your dad and your brothers, and she's stuck with a mom and that she doesn't feel real comfortable with because she doesn't feel like she's all that happy about her son marrying her, kind of thing.
Yeah, right.
It's just, especially for the women, it's a touchy time. It's because they send off the vibes and they pick up the vibes. The men are kind of oblivious watching football.
Oh my goodness. It's true. Yep, I'm agree. Yeah, I'm not the football watcher, but most men are. That gets to me.
Yeah.
And who should we discuss things early? How do we avoid this upset? Any things, precautionary methods we could take?
Jill, it always goes back to the same thing. We have to tune in to each other. We need to get on each other's wavelengths. She's dealing with different things than he is, and he's dealing with
Hmm.
different things than she is. And so they both need to be able to talk freely in a non-threatening way about what can happen and
Yeah.
what to expect, so they can kind of back each other and do things to make things easier. For example, it's not uncommon for a husband inadvertently to totally abandon his wife with his mother and his sisters and with other kids and all kinds of stuff. Well, he goes the whole day somewhere with his brothers and his dad, and she just absolutely abandoned.
Yeah.
And he needs to get into what that would feel like and
Yeah.
seek to do things to minimize that kind of thing. He's
Yeah.
got to be more on her side than he is on his own. He's got to be unselfish. And he's got to really be tuned in more to how she sees things than how his mom sees things. He's got to, you got to be kind to everybody and understanding everybody, but she's first place. He's
Yeah.
got to keep her first place.
Oh my goodness. It's so funny. It's so hard.
That
Um,
is.
I feel there's so many relationships though affected by the whole in-law thing. Just back just to behavior. I got to go back to this because it bothers me. Like everyone I know, like no, the mother never likes the daughter-in-law. What's the underlying problem? You're feeling that bad? Like you stole my son? Like what is it? Why are women like just gotta, what's the psyche behind this?
Well, as you know, as a woman, you love your children. You love, you're very sensitive to, you're very attached to, you're very protective of, and if she feels, for example, that the girl, for whatever reason, isn't good enough for him, which is typically the case,
Yeah.
not a good enough cook, or she doesn't take good enough care of the kids, or she's too selfish, or she's too lazy, or she's too messy, or she didn't keep the house as well as she should. A lot of times mother-in-laws will come and go through the house trying to get everything fixed up in the grounds that she's helping her daughter-in-law. You know? And that can come across really badly. She thinks I'm a slob, and every time she comes here, she's changing, arranging things, and she's moving things, and she's cleaning things, and that might be a really heartfelt thing the mom's doing, but it doesn't feel that way to the daughter, to the wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And I even have a girlfriend who she does not speak to her husband's mother anymore, and the husband doesn't, his own mother, and the kids. It's so sad. I'm like, but can it be resolved? It's like, no, she's a, bitch and this and that, and now she doesn't even see the grandkids anymore. And I'm like, it's so sad that has to get there. And they don't even know their cousins and has to go to something like that, you know? It kills me. It kills me.
That's not uncommon, Jill. It's really not uncommon. And, a man loves his wife and he loves his family and wants to keep his family together. And quite a few men will go to the extreme of disassociating with his own family just to keep his wife and keep his family together. And that's
Yeah,
really, I mean, I can sympathize with some of the pressures and things that a woman feels, but they should work that out.
I
Like you say,
agree.
that's hard on the kids and their cousins, and it's a big deal.
Absolutely. Well, also, let's talk more about some more of the problems, right? That could be happening with a couple, and maybe tell some of the typical problems, areas that couples can deal with at this time, and how can we avoid and minimize this conflict? Mm,
Well, first you got to recognize it
okay.
and try to get off of whose fault it is, you know, and try to get into what it feels like to be your spouse, what it feels like to be the husband, what it feels like to be the wife,
Mm-hmm.
and just be kind to each other and speak carefully and slowly and responsibly, not get all emotional and say radical things that trigger each other, you know? You want if you're really focusing on what the other person feels like and how they see things, you're not as likely to say something that's going to trigger them.
Yep.
And of course, once you trigger them, you've started what we call the four horsemen of the apocalypse. It's a vicious circle. It's very painful. And it gets so intense that your pulse rates up, your face is red, you can't think straight, and you're doing a lot of relational damage. So the key when you're talking about sensitive subjects, and this is a good example of it, you really got to slow down. You got to be calm. You got to be in the morning, maybe over coffee. Don't do it when you're tired. Don't do it when you're under a lot of stress. And as soon as you start getting flooded, say, we need to take a break and separate yourselves, calm down. Maybe later that evening, pick up, talk about it again. But this time, don't pick up where you left off, but just clarify what triggered you and what triggered them. Each of you share what happened that morning that made you start getting really upset. And then you can be calm again because you've calm that down. Now we can talk about the facts.
Yeah.
What's going to be done here and how we're going to do that. But the enemy is getting all emotionally upset and triggered. And then you do a lot of damage, make things worse and worse and worse. And somebody's got to win and somebody's got to lose, you know.
Oh my
They
goodness.
both
Well,
lose. The whole family loses.
totally. No,
Yeah.
it's so true. It's so true. Well, do you want to talk more about some, challenges when it comes to children and bringing them around different families and yeah, that could get a little hectic too.
Children can be a big problem in the holidays because parenting styles, especially with young children, some parents achieve better control of young children in the right way. The kids are more manageable. Others have an
Mm-hmm.
attitude. They're just little animals, and they're just going to squeal and break things and run around and do nutty things. You know, you can have all kinds of attitudes about how to handle little kids. But if you're a person that knows how to discipline properly and keep children from being too disruptive or too messy or too destructive, and then you come into a situation where the rules are anything goes, and it's your property now they're breaking lamps or they're spilling chocolate on the white carpet or who knows what. This whole management of how you parent is kind of really be a big
Mm-hmm.
thing in the holidays. It really can.
Oh
It's
gosh.
difficult, really challenging.
Yeah, it certainly is. But we also got to stop and remember, love our families, love thy neighbor, and this is the time to give and to kind of relax and maybe have
Yeah.
a little drink and things will get better, or it can make that a little worse, right? The family part.
Depends on how much drink. You know, the funny thing about drinking is people think that, well, as long as you're not falling down drunk, it's no big deal.
Mm.
But you've got to realize that when you start imbibing alcohol, the first thing that goes are your inhibitions.
I was just gonna say inhibitions are lessened.
Uh,
Absolutely.
And that sounds romantic in a context of, sex or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not very romantic when you're under pressure because when you lose inhibitions, you're likely to say things you wouldn't say, react in ways you wouldn't react. And
Yeah.
it's much more dangerous relationally, in this kind of a situation, especially. And that brings up the whole issue of traditions regarding drinking.
Yeah.
Like if you have a family that are teetotalers, or go to a family that are all getting drunk for Christmas or for Thanksgiving. And that's hard.
Oh gosh. Oh my goodness. I know. Dealt with that over the summer. I had a family party. It was a kid party, and then no one drank until after the kids left. And then became a whole fight with my brother, my sister, and I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, alcohol, family dynamic. Brother who is really annoying from North Carolina has nowhere to stay, then wants to stay with us and always causes trouble. And then the alcohol, and I'm like, like you love your family, but sometimes you got
Mhm.
to say no. And I think a lot of people have problems with that. Is it okay to say no? You don't want to see that in-law, that person. How do you handle that?
Well, if you're hosting, it's a little easier. They're coming to your house,
Hmm.
you just don't have it on the premises. You say, inhibitions can be lost and people get upset. And we just don't want any of that stuff.
Yeah.
We can drink good tasting pop and other kinds of beverages, but let's just lay off of this so we can all be happy. Not the kind of happy that gets mad, right after being happy. So it's just like I say, Jill, it's tough. It's
Mm.
just really tough. Now, another thing you might think about here, especially people that are not married yet, you might want to marry people that are compatible with you.
Mm-hmm.
You might marry into a family that are kind of like your family,
Mm-hmm.
and marry a person that's used to the mores that you're used to and doing things the way you're used to.
Yep.
This business of just falling in love and marrying someone because you have good sex or they're cute can lead to all kinds of horrible problems later when you find out how different you are.
Yeah, very true.
You
Very
know?
true. Yeah. Oh my goodness. All right, back on track here. We are here with James Ramsey. James, how do we contact you? Remind our listeners how we can reach you for your counseling services.
Yeah, well, I appreciate just educating people over the podcast here, but a lot of times people need help. And it's really a good idea to call a therapist. I know a pretty good one that you could call. My phone number is 406-370-3515. And I'm open for
Yay.
business. I'd be happy to talk to you wherever you are.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for that. Well, let's move on down our list here. What about where are we? I always get confused because we just start talking, but I know I have a list. Uh we were talking about potential upsets, right? That
And
may
we're going to
result
talk
from
about children.
diverse family. Yes, we're done with children. We're done with children?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, good. Then what kinds of potential upsets may result from diverse family traditions, such as traditional activities between close family members?
Well, just all kinds of things. The brothers might want to go out to a girlish place or something, you know, and you don't want your husband doing that. You know, there's just all
Yeah.
kinds of stuff that people do that are just, it cause conflict. Um, uh, and of course, in the other level, if one of your family members say something negative to your wife or your spouse,
Ah,
oh boy.
yep.
Or infer something bad or make some snide remark or some joke.
Mm-hmm.
That can cause a lot of trouble because you got to defend your spouse. You got to love your spouse. And so there's all kinds of little nerve endings you got to avoid. And some are pretty big.
Oh my goodness, I can only imagine. Let me ask from your personal experience. You've been married for a long time. Was there ever family issues in your own family?
Not really. I've been married, total of over 55 years. And when we get together, we're just close family and love each other. And worst thing that could happen is like down in San Diego, we go down in winter, and sometimes the whole mob would be together, about 50 of us in some kind of a winter resort where we're tobogganing and playing in snow and all kinds of stuff. But boy, a couple times the flu bug hit us, and everybody in the place got sick.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
that's
Oh,
about the worst that happened to us. But as far as being compatible and knowing each other for years, and my extended family is just as close to me as my family is, and vice versa. And that's a
oh,
blessing. I'll tell you what, that is a blessing to have extended family that you love and enjoy as much or more, even in some ways, than your own family.
yeah. Oh, I know I have neighbors that they all took a cruise together to like the Greek islands and Italy and with like 15 family members from Florida, from New York. I'm just like, wow, really you guys get along? She's like, it's great. I'm like, wow, you just don't it's nice to see that. It really is. And we can only wish that everyone does get along. And okay, next question. Let's move on over if we can. So let's talk about some of the potential upsets that may result. We kind of mentioned from diverse family traditions, but relative to like the food preparation and the drinking traditions, which we kind of talked to that, and then how we're parenting our children as well.
Yeah. Well, even the food preparation thing could be a little bit of trouble. Uh, you got to defer to the main cook, who is probably the hostess, and just be a really good helper. Um, just do everything you can to help keep the kitchen clean and just work, and enjoy it. Women can have a good time cooking if they're, talking and get caught up on news, and there's no
Mm-hmm.
reason for there to be conflict. Uh, but differences are a big deal, and people underestimate how big they are, you
Yep.
know. And you need to find somebody that's mature and healthy and has loving
Mm-hmm.
relationships and then you have the same on your side, well then things work just fine. But if you don't, you got to put up with that uncle, or you got to put up with that brother, or you got to put up with that mother, or that father, or both, or the whole clan, or
So we didn't have this problem during COVID, right? Did
oh
people get
boy.
along a lot better in COVID for the holidays, I
Well,
mean?
it kind of depends, you know. If the COVID thing is your own family, it's not so bad.
Yeah,
If you
true.
get cooped up with extended family, it can be pretty tough because they're still different and you still have the problems. And now they're even worse because they're upset and they got cabin fever.
Oh my gosh. I feel like, yeah, you didn't want Aunt Betsy coming. It didn't matter because, hey, no one's coming over. It's COVID. So that was my excuse to stay away from the in-laws, right? All right. Well,
Uh,
it's true.
so from the marriage counseling point of view, holidays and family reunions are crises for a lot of people. They really are. And I'm just saying again, if you're a young person, you're thinking about getting married, you just might want to think about how can I get maximally healthy, personally and emotionally, and how can I find somebody that shares my values? And I know that some people have attitudes about church or whatever, but there's some awful like good people that go to churches that are, they're kind to each other. They have dinner prepared for each other when they're sick, and they're
Mm-hmm.
often closer than average families because they see each other
Yeah.
more than once a week for
Yeah.
service stuff,
Uh-huh.
Bible study groups and home groups and potlucks. And, you can say what you want about that.
But,
In fact, we refer to it as a church family. There's a
aw.
lot to be said for the connections that we need to have.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and my dad loves saying this one, the family that stays together is the family that prays together.
Yeah, yeah,
Depending what faith they're in, but I love when he says that. And I take my kids to church on Sundays and it's always, I don't
yeah.
know, doing stuff like that with your family warms my heart. And yeah, it does. That's my opinion. Moving on. What about some attitudes? What are some key attitudes, maybe in agreements that should be in place to really successfully navigate those challenges that may present themselves to you as a
Well, I think
couple?
there's some attitudes, there's some agreements, there's some principles that need to be in place.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I really want to understand where you're coming from.
Okay.
Instead, I'm speaking of spouse to spouse. It's not about me, it's about you. And it's not about me, it's about you. We're into each other and how they think and how they feel. And I want
Mm-hmm.
to understand you, you want to understand me. We want to help each other. But the typical immature people on this planet, it's all about me, 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 and screw you. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's sad, but it's that attitude. It's just a horrible attitude. And
Yeah.
so the more you're willing to give and you're willing to compromise, you're willing to understand, you're willing to support, things get so much better. And
Yeah.
so I know I sound like a broken record, but was the main thing in marriage is you got to be mature enough to really respect and value and honor the other person,
Yeah.
you
So
know?
true. So
It's not
true.
just something you talk about, it's something you do.
Yeah. Well, also about let's talk a little more about behaviors that you need to display as a couple, right? To help everyone stay connected in a sense. And how do you avoid negative reactions and emotions? It's like you got to have like a team plan going in, right? A little huddle before the holiday.
Well, yeah, I think it's a good idea to have a little huddle before you have a family reunion. We talk about how
Yeah.
we're going to do this, how we're going to handle that. Need to have a debriefing afterward. Well, what did we do wrong today? We can do better tomorrow. You just gotta have to kind of, especially if you've got all kinds of landmines and different possible problems, you got to be getting your heads together on this. What are we going to do here? What are we going to do there? What did we do wrong today? What can we do different tomorrow? Maybe you're going to stay with them for a week, you know?
Yeah, right.
You know, uh,
uh,
so I guess I come back to you young couple, you young folks that are thinking about getting married. Slow down, get to know
hmm.
these people.
Yeah.
I don't care
It's
how cute they are, how handsome they are, how rich they are. You want somebody that you can live with for a lifetime.
that is so true. Beautifully said, right? You got to look for a partner. And you don't you say it like a best friend, right? A best friend.
Best friend. Your very, very, very best friend. Yes.
Aw,
That's right.
well, thank you so much. We love this, and we still have got 2 minutes left. So, how did you want to kind of end off for today?
Well, Two things. I guess I would just encourage you to take heart what we've talked about. You're going into the holidays, especially Thanksgiving, for Pete's sake. And Christmas, such a generous time, a wonderful time. And I also think it's kind of a time to reflect on who we are as Americans, our traditions,
Mm-hmm.
our inheritance. There's a lot of influences that are affecting Americans now that are not healthy. They're getting us away from family, away from traditions, away from things that bind us together and make us happy and content. And you've got to be careful about some of these experiments, pretty destructive. In fact, I think a lot of the things that happen that are cultural experiments, it's kind of like a 20-year experiment, with some idea. I remember when the cocaine was a big deal years ago. They said it's non-addictive, and it'll enhance your performance.
Wow.
And I had a cousin that played for the Grizzly basketball team, and they were all taking cocaine. It's an enhancement drug. Well, let me tell you something. That cousin, his life is ruined to this day. He's an old man, and he's been on drugs his whole life because it turned out that cocaine is not physically addictive, but it's emotionally addictive. You're psychologically addicted to it.
Wow. Amazing.
But I just use that as an example. There's certain fads about what's cool and what's not cool, and everybody's doing it kind of stuff. But you check them out 20 years later.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time. And one more time, tell us the website.
Aletheia, marriagecounseling.com.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time here. Have a great Thanksgiving. We'll talk soon.
Same to you, Jill.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.